we're all probably familiar with the propaganda that's put out there that says love is love. And, love conquers all. We're just supposed to be in love, and love is the barometer by which we determine whether something is right or wrong. Actually, we could say some of us who might be more, politically speaking, more conservative, we might look at the left, the more liberal, politically speaking, world, and blame them for that. We might even blame the LGBTQ community for that propaganda and that improper categorization of love. But that's really not the people. That's not the place where the blame belongs. The blame, in case you're wondering, for the love movement, love is love. Can you guess what I'm going to say? The church. That's right. Pauline Christianity. Love is love. There are several reasons for this. And by the way, I'm not wrong. Why? Because, people say, God is love and follow your heart. God knows my heart. Do what you want to do. The church is the reason why we have the Love is Love campaign. It's not because of the LGBT community. They are spewing it because it comes from the church. And you might say to yourself, but I thought it's more of a demonic ideology. You might have that opinion. My response to you would be, yeah, Pauline Christianity is demonically inspired because it's the opposite of the Word of God. So what position are we to take? Are we to take a politically conservative position on this topic, or are we to take a politically liberal position on this topic? My answer, neither. It's not about politics. What we define as forbidden relationships is not based on whether you vote, however you vote. Okay, that's not how we base. We don't base anything, by the way, what we believe as Jews on political ideology. Can and often is or are our political ideology, does it match with Torah? Yes, that's most often the case. But that's not our barometer. Somebody, as an example, somebody might be more more of a Democrat mindset when it comes to politics on certain issues. However, their view of forbidden relationships, and likewise for the person who's more conservative, more Republican, their view of forbidden relationships as a Jew has to be Torah-centric. Our rubric of what is allowed and what is forbidden is Torah-centric. And that's really the bottom line. So is it all about love? No, actually it's not. Is love a factor in relationships? Well, obviously so, right? But it's not about love. It's about what God says is forbidden and what is not forbidden. And in our Torah portion today of Achrei, we have these forbidden relationships articulated to us. It comes from chapter 18 into chapter 19, which gets into the Parashat Kodashim, about what is allowed and what isn't. And let me say a couple other things about this. First of all, it's about holiness. This is what it means to be a holy people. Holiness might mean different things to different people. And with all due respect to all of us, what we think holiness means or doesn't mean is frankly meaningless. Our opinion, although we're entitled to it, our opinion is frankly our opinion. It's about as good as the Sunday comics. Unless, of course, our opinion is based on truth and fact, in which case it's really not our opinion. You see the difference there? So the other thing I want to say is, do we know people who are involved in forbidden relationships? Of course. Are we supposed to hate them and despise them? No. And we have to find that balance when we have people that we know, sometimes personally, in these forbidden relationships. We have to strike the balance between treating them, politely and diplomatically. At the same time, not openly condoning their way of life. We don't have to say, oh, it's perfectly fine. I don't even mind. It's totally great. I accept you for who you are. We have to stop short of that. And by the way, sometimes that bothers people, and rightly so. The reason it bothers them, by the way, in case you're wondering, from a psychological point of view, so they know that they're doing wrong. And if you don't condone their relationship, then it just further exasperates their own self-inflicted self-conscious. And that's why, you can treat them politely, treat them respectfully, but if you don't condone who they are, then they get upset. Of course, we see this in our day and age, and some people are more empathetic and more, what's the word I'm looking for? They're empathetic, they're empaths, and so they don't want to hurt people's feelings, which, by the way, is a great character trait. And so some people may wonder, well, this person is in delusion about who they are, and I just feel like I need to go along with that delusion. And we just can't do that. We have to go, and again, we have to be polite and be diplomatic and be respectful. At the same time, sticking to what is or what is not allowed. And so in our reading today, we're going to be using the Kale Tumash, and we're going to find out what is and what isn't allowed. By the way, funny little aside, we in our culture here in the United States, there is a tongue-in-cheek joke about kissing cousins. And what's interesting is that, biblically, not that anybody would necessarily want to do this, I guess, but it is interesting that biblically you could, in fact, marry your first cousin. And apparently in some states, I think in some states it's allowed, and some states it's forbidden. I don't really know exactly, the what and what for is about that, but it is interesting. I throw that out there as an interesting, because most people, of course, they would think that would be forbidden, but actually it isn't, which I find interesting. But most people, that's not an issue for them, of course. But let's look at forbidden relationships as it relates to what the Torah says. And again, the Torah has to be our rubric when it comes to these types of conversations. And we just have to settle it there. God said to do it, so therefore we do. And sometimes we may not understand. It's possible that there are people out there that may not understand what the big deal is. And that's all fine and good. The beautiful thing about Judaism is it's perfectly fine to ask questions. It's perfectly fine in Judaism to say, I wonder, why can't we eat rabbit? Or why can't we, I don't know, cross-dress or whatever? Or why can't we work on Shabbat? It's perfectly fine to have these kinds of questions and ask these questions, as long as you're being obedient. It's like with your parents. It was perfectly fine to ask your dad, why do I have to do whatever it is that you're telling me to do, while you're doing it, right? And then he would say, well, son, because blah, 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 right? But you and I both know, for those of us who have, parents that were not insane, if we said to our dad, I'm not going to do what you tell me to do until I fully understand why you're telling me to do it. Now, for the vast majority of us, that conversation would not end up very well. we would not have, we would have awakened the next day and regretted our decision to make that comment. So, clearly what I'm saying here makes sense. We can question, sure, while we're being obedient, and also recognizing, I should add, that not everything has a reason. Not everything has, or at least I should clarify, does not have a reason that you and I can comprehend in our, finite human mind. Good morning, Sergio. Glad to see you. Good morning, Amita. Good morning, Greg. Good morning, Peaches, formerly from Georgia. Good morning, Jimmy. Jubilee, Boker Tov. Hepzibah, Boker Tov to you. Keturah, Boker Tov. Atara, good morning. Lori, Boker Tov. Yitzhak, good morning. Lantern Signals, good morning to you. Seth, good morning, sir. And let's see, Grace, good morning. Matthew, good morning to you. Chris and Crystal, good morning. Let's see here. Katora, Boker Tov. Wendeley de los Santos, good morning to you. Good morning, Daniel. Good to see you, sir. Good morning, Kathy and Gianna and Sarah Merritt. Hope you and Shane are doing great. Good morning, Ariella Rafaela. Good morning, Zahava. And let's see, Tony, excuse me. Good morning, Chanel. Good morning, Ahava. Good morning, John. Good morning, let's see, who are Zake and Rayford. Good morning, sir. Good morning, Milka. Hope you and Zara are doing great. Good morning, Leah and Levi and Ami. Good morning to you. Good morning, Samuel. And let's see, did I miss anybody? Shmuel, there's Shmuel. Good morning, sir. Good morning to you, Jeff. Good morning, Jeff. Good to see you, sir, from beautiful Monahans. Probably listening, although from Odessa. Good morning, Sarah Johanna. Good morning, Carl. Good to see you this morning. Glad you are here. Let's see. Good morning, Thelma. Glad to see you this morning. Yitzhak, you know, that's a little bit of wisdom from Yitzhak this morning. If you have a question about plumbing, ask a plumber, not an electrician. Boy, that is actually brilliant wisdom that a lot of people need to know. That's thank you for that. It's very important. Good morning, Joseph. And good morning, Obi-Wan. Good to see you. All right, so let's dive into this. Forbidden relationships. Most of this, of course, we know. Most of this is intrinsic to our understanding. Nevertheless, it's the opening to the Keho Tumash I find very interesting because it has an air of logic and sympathetic nature. Sympathism. I think I just made up a word that relates back to people who would want to have forbidden relationships. In other words, what the Keho Tumash is bringing down, of course, pulling from the sources, is Hashem speaking to us with an understanding voice. Meaning, I can understand why you might want to have such a relationship. Now, of course, forbidden relationships, before I start reading, I should mention, we're not talking here about just about homosexuality. Are same-sex relationships absolutely forbidden? Yes. Is it a sin? 100%. Okay? 100%. However, that's not the only forbidden relationship. And I think we should be mindful of that, right? So anyway, it goes on to say, or here it begins, I should say, reading from the Keho Tumash in chapter 18, verse 1. It says, God spoke to Moses saying, speak to the Israelites and say to them, it may seem to you that the closer a relative is to you, the more fitting he or she should be as a spouse. After all, Abraham specifically sought a relative as a wife for his son Isaac. By having children together, spouses become one flesh, and this goal is accomplished all the more when the spouse themselves are related, and marriages among close relatives have already been both sanctioned and successful. Adam's children married each other. Jacob married sisters. His sons married sisters. Amram married his aunt Jochebed, by whom he fathered Moses, Aaron, and Miriam. So, pause here for a second. All this is very intriguing. And, you know, this makes a lot of logical sense. You might say, well, you know, I would be closest to a relative, us becoming one flesh. Well, I mean, if we're relatives, we are kind of already one flesh. So that kind of would enhance the one fleshness. That's all understandable. It's also interesting too, because the Torah, or the Keos rather, is pointing out that there are other marriages, as I just articulated here, that were in fact forbidden relationships. And a lot of people look to this, and rightfully so. We look and say, well, if the Torah forbids, as an example, if the Torah forbids us to, let's say, marry sisters, then how is it that Jacob married sisters? We can't marry our aunt, and yet, you know, Amram did just that. You know, the answer to these riddles, how is it that Adam's children married their sisters? Because that's in fact what happened. In that case, what else could you do? It's not like, you know, there were women already here. or men for that matter. But this also brings up something very interesting. And that is that you have Torah law, which expressly says, as an example, don't marry sisters. Let's just use that as an example, because this is the question that has often come up to me. Okay, don't marry sisters. And then you have Jacob, one of the patriarchs, who married sisters. Now you could say, well, he didn't mean to. That wasn't really his intention, and all that's valid. But the fact matter is, he did in fact marry sisters. Okay. And what's the answer? How did God allow that? And Torah has always existed. So what's the issue there? And the answer is we don't really know. But what we do know is that out of all the many millions and of hundreds of millions of Jews who've ever lived and existed, he's the only one who married sisters. And so here's what you and I need to be very careful that we don't ever do. And that is try to overturn a Torah law based on some obscure anomaly. This happens all the time with respect to meat and dairy. The Torah makes it clear that meat and dairy should not be consumed, cooked, baked, boiled, whatever, together. And people will say, well, but didn't Abraham have meat and dairy with God and two angels? The answer, of course, is no, he did not. And I point this out quite succinctly in my teaching on it. But even if he did, my answer to you is, okay, the next time that HaShem shows up in manifested form, not in your imagination, but the next time HaShem shows up with two angels and has dinner at your house, then fine, you can have meat and dairy together. You see, and of course, that's a tongue-in-cheek sarcasm, because we cannot take an anomaly and overturn Torah law. Capiche? Great. So it goes on to say, nonetheless, despite any logical arguments to the contrary, I am forbidding you to marry certain close relatives. You heard me say, I am God, your God at Mount Sinai. When I pronounced the Ten Commandments at that time, you accepted my authority over you. You must therefore now accept these rules regarding with whom you may and may not engage in carnal relationships that we're talking about here. We're talking about carnal relationships, whether or not they make sense to you. Let me emphasize this last phrase. In fact, repeat this with me. Whether or not they make sense to you. Let's say that again. Whether or not they make sense to you. Ladies and gentlemen, Torah law is not up to our imagination. It's not up to whether or not we think it makes sense or whatever we feel or whatever. It doesn't matter whether or not it makes sense to you. Why can't I marry my sister or whatever? I know for a lot of you that's like, and rightly so. It is an but in some cultures, it might make sense to them. You see what I'm saying? I don't know. I can't think of a culture. I'm sure one exists. The point is that, we're not allowed to do that. Now, it says, furthermore, I am aware that an amorous attachment to another person may be so strong that it may cause you to consider defying these prohibitions or even forsaking me altogether if you become attached to someone forbidden to you, particularly a non-Jew that I'll be forbidding later, as it says here. So the point is, again, even if you have this is where the love argument fails. Amorous. I love this person so much. They were my best friend growing up, and they happen to be the same sex as me. So because I have such a strong love for them, I want to be in this relationship with them carnally, This is where the love argument fails. It does. Our emotion is not valid to make a legal decision. Okay. Emotion is not valid to make a legal decision. It's not about, this is why the God is love, is God a God of love? Yes. Is God love? See, that's a little bit of because this is why the God of love theology is so wrong, because it transitions all of our decision making into being emotionally based. What do I love? What feels good? What seems right? It's all emotion based. Doing right in one's own eyes is an emotion based cult. Okay. Lantern Signal says the Amish. Did the Amish marry their sisters? I didn't know that. I don't know if that's true. I think she's asking. I don't know. And that's right, Leah. Let me go ahead and put Leah on there because that's a great statement. Facts don't care about your feelings. So true. It's so true. Facts don't care about your feelings. We defeated the British, and twice, by the way, in order to gain our freedom. Now, if you're British, like Keturah, that might hurt her feelings. Nevertheless, the facts are the facts. So we continue to read. We continue to read here. It says, therefore, bear in mind that I, the creator and ruler of the world, am the source of these prohibitions. So you should not expect any positive outcome from transgressing them. Hello. You should not expect, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to put that up there. Bear to pray. You should not expect any positive outcome from transgressing them. Ladies and gentlemen, when we transgress the will of the Creator, we will never experience a positive outcome. Never. And if you think to flout the possibility of future misery in favor of ephemeral happiness, bear in mind further that I am your God, who will administer corrective punishment that will nullify any transient happiness when you don't comply. And finally, if you ask why I implanted in you the ability to become so strongly attached to other people that it might compel you to defy me, it's in order to reward you commensurately for overcoming this challenge, and be assured that I, as God, can be relied upon to reward you amply when you comply with my will. So this is so for those people out there who have seemingly, they are tempted, they have an inner urge to have forbidden relationships. Not everybody has that. You weren't born that way. You know, the whole idea of, well, God, this is how God made me, or this is how I was born. I'm sorry. No, ladies and gentlemen, Hashem did not create you as a sinner. He did not create you with a inner dynamic that makes you want to defy his will. That is not how you were created. No, ma'am, no, sir. Okay. If that happens to be you, the more you resist those forbidden relationships. And again, I remind you, I'm not talking just about homosexuality. Okay, there's lots of other forbidden relationships. If that's you, then your resistance to that inner urge grants you more merit, grants you more spiritual power. Okay, so this is all things that must be understood. Now, verse 3 says, you must not imitate any of the practice of the Egyptians in this regard, particularly the practice on part of the Egyptians where you dwell. You must not imitate the practices of Canaan, okay, of which I'm bringing you. Moreover, you must not even follow their social conventions, okay, such as attending their dramatic performances and some of their sports events, engaging in their superstitious practices. So for the Christians out there who are listening to me, and you think it's okay to have the pagan Easter and pagan Christmas and pagan Halloween and pagan other things, because you're just Christianizing pagan practice. This is another one of those places in the scriptures where it directly forbids that action or that mentality. We're not allowed to copy paganism, period, at all, ever. Okay. Now it goes on to say, rather, you must perform my ordinances, which are my rational commandments, and safeguard my rules, which are my supra-rational commandments, by studying the laws governing their observance. Furthermore, you must continue to pursue them and their study, even when you think that you've mastered them. Never think that you are free to forsake their study in favor of the study of other cultures or religions. I am your God, whose authority you must accept unconditionally. So again, even if we think we know a particular topic of Torah, and today we're talking about forbidden relationships, that does not give us excuse to neglect their study. We have to study. We have to pay attention. Even though you might say, well, I don't struggle with this. I would never want to marry my aunt or my sister or a same sex. You say that would never happen. First of all, never say never, okay? Because the minute that you say, I would never fall into XYZ sin, you're treading on thin ice at that point. Can I just tell you? You're treading on thin ice. So don't ever say that, okay? In fact, in my opinion, and in the opinion of the sages, if we want to be spiritually healthy, we should assume that we're capable of anything. If we assume that we're capable of anything, then we won't leave any area unguarded. Does that make sense? So it says here, you must even safeguard the details of my rules and my ordinances, which I give you, of which a man must do in order to live by them eternally, that is, in the afterlife. I, being God, may be relied upon to fulfill my promises regarding this reward. Okay? Interesting, Paul abused this idea of living by the commandments. You must live by them. He interpreted it to mean that you must live by them to the extent that if you don't do them, then you'll be, crushed under the hammer of divine justice. And then he further perpetuated the lie that the law of Moses can't save you, which, by the way, is a total lie, because the word of God can save you. And Psalm 19 is the easiest place to see that untruth. But also here, that if we keep the commandments, we will in fact live, not just in this life, but in the life to come. So it says, no man or woman may come near to any of his or her close relatives listed below to uncover their nakedness. Uncover their nakedness is a nice biblical expression for carnal relationships. Okay? So it says, even though the following prohibition are couched only as addressing men, they are equally applicable to women. Okay? As it goes on to say, I am God, and you must observe my commandments. You must not uncover the nakedness of your father, his wife, even if she is not your mother, nor uncover the nakedness of your mother, even if she is not your father's wife. In either case, she is, in this regard, your mother. You must not uncover her nakedness. Furthermore, you must not uncover the nakedness of your father's wife, even after your father has died. It is still considered your father's nakedness. Regarding the nakedness of your sister, even if she is only your half-sister, but not your mother's or your father's daughter or what have you, and even if she's the offspring of a forbidden marriage, okay, whether the woman she is born to is allowed to remain in the home as your father's wife, or the woman she is born to must be sent out of the house. In other words, suppose your Jewish father took a non-Jewish wife and they had a daughter, she's still forbidden to you, even though she's from a forbidden marriage. You must not uncover the nakedness of any such sister. The prohibition against fornication with your father's daughter applies even to a daughter born to a woman your father had, sexually assaulted or seduced. Regarding the nakedness of your son by rape or seduction, daughter or your daughter's daughter by rape or seduction, daughter, you must not uncover their nakedness, for even though their parents were not conceived by you in marriage, they are still considered your own nakedness, that is, your close relative. Similarly, you must not fornicate with your daughter by rape or by seduction. Okay? So I gave the example of the man who had a forbidden marriage, but this is talking about they weren't married at all, but it was just, by rape or seduction. Still forbidden, okay? Regarding the nakedness of your father's wife's daughter, only if she is born to your father, that is the offspring of a union that does not make her a Gentile, is she considered your sister, whose nakedness you must not uncover. You must not uncover the nakedness of your father's sister. She's a close relative of yours. You must not uncover the nakedness of your mother's sister, for she is a close relative of your mother. You must not uncover the nakedness of your father's brother. You must not approach his wife. She's your aunt. You must not uncover the nakedness of your daughter-in-law. She is your son's legal wife. You must not uncover her nakedness. You must not uncover the nakedness of your brother's wife. It's your brother's nakedness. Okay. Now, what's interesting there is that if your father's wife, whether she's your mother or stepmother or whatever, she's forbidden to you even after he passes away. But the brother's wife is not, and that's just an interesting nuance. And that goes to the Levirate marriage, where if your brother dies and doesn't have any children, you're supposed to halakhically under when there's this, marry his wife. It's just an interesting nuance about that. So it says, you must not uncover the nakedness of a woman or her daughter, whether or not she's your daughter. Also, if you are or have been married to either one of them, you must not take in marriage her son's daughter or her daughter's daughter to uncover the nakedness. You must not take a woman and her sister in marriage. Okay, we talked about that. You must not approach a woman in order to uncover her nakedness during her nidah, during her monthly separation. Okay, you must not lie carnally with your neighbor's wife. Okay, thereby causing yourself to become spiritually defiled by her. You must not give any of your offspring to the priests of idolatry in order for them to pass the child through the fire of Molech, God forbid. You must not profane the name of your God in the eyes of people worshiping Molech. I am God who may be relied upon to punish you for doing this. And then we continue in verse 22. You must not lie down with a male as with a woman. This is considered an abomination. The word abomination, I want to point out there, is in Hebrew is the word toeva, which means an abomination, an idolatrous practice, right? Abominable. It's worth noting that the word toeva is used in connection to kosher, not eating non-kosher food. So there are people who might be listening today who are of Christian persuasion, and you might think to yourself, well, yeah, a man having carnal relationships with another man, or for that matter, a woman doing likewise, is an abomination. And I would agree with you. That's true. That is, in fact, what the Torah says. But the same word for abomination as it relates to that homosexual practice is the same word used when eating lobster or shrimp or pork. So if you're sitting down to have a slab of bacon or a lobster tail because Paul told you it's okay, just think that the Torah relates the same abomination to that as it does to homosexuality. In other words, eating a lobster tail, you might as well be having a homosexual relationship. So it says here, as you have been taught, you must not fornicate with an animal. Now, again, we read this stuff and we think to ourselves, who would do that? But in our modern age, this is unfortunately a practice that is gaining traction. So it says, you must not fornicate with any animal, thereby becoming spiritually defiled by it. A woman must not stand in front of an animal to fornicate with it. This is a depravity, yeah, I should say so, and an unnatural mingling of human and animal seed. In fact, this was, by the way, one of the criteria of the animals that came on the ark. The animals had become defiled too because of the sin of mankind. And as a result, the animals that came onto the ark, the only pairs that were allowed to come on were the ones who had not defiled themselves by having relationships with another species. Okay. So just to kind of wrap this up, we say you must not spiritually defile yourself by doing any of these things. For the nations whom I am sending out of Canaan from before you have defiled themselves by doing all of these things. You see, just when we think, man, no, who would do this? The Canaanites did. I'm sure there's plenty of cultures today that do all of this, right? And thus the land, which is supposed to be a paragon of holiness, instead became spiritually defiled. I have therefore brought the account of its inhabitants sin upon it, and the land has already vomited out its inhabitants, and so to speak, and is becoming your possession. So the land may not vomit you out for having spiritually defiled it, just as it vomited out the nations that preceded you. There's probably nothing more disgusting than vomit, and we don't want to be involved in forbidden relationships if we don't want to be vomited out. I know I don't. And so we go over this today because, as I mentioned in the reading, these are things that we may not already seem to know, but we need to keep them in the forefront so that we're not confused by the propaganda that occurs out in the world. So when you see that sign that says, it's got the rainbow and it says love is love, just shake your head and go, no, it's not. It's not based on love. It's based on the Torah. It's based on the will of the Father in heaven. End of our Aliyah today. Thank you so much for being a part of our program today. We will be back tomorrow. Don't let me forget something. I just realized just now I meant to start out with talking about the Messiah's atoning sacrifice as it relates to the temple service, and I forgot. Please don't let me forget tomorrow. I want to mention, it's a very quick thing, but it's important, and I wanted to mention it. So on the chat tomorrow, try to remind me, and if I forget, remind me. Thank you so much. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Until then, have a great and amazing day. Shalom Aleichem.